Hello, Angelique. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I know we spoke about this a long time ago, so you're a very busy lady. I'm so glad you've got a moment to come and chat with us. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Josephine. Nice seeing you again.
Lovely. And it's my pleasure to have you, Angelique. Angelique Zammit, you've been a HR professional for decades. You've led HR for many organisations. You've led HR teams, and particularly at the highest level of the organisation across really diverse industries: manufacturing, technology, retail. So really vast experience. There were many things we could have spoken about today, but we've landed on a topic around how has the role changed? So how has that HR director, HR manager, head of people and culture, whatever way we want to talk about it, how has that role changed? And so I'm really looking forward to getting into that and some insights from you, particularly as we're on this precipice of the whole workforce changing, really, because of technological advances, but also just because of the way in which organisations are changing and adapting to new environments. So let's start firstly, because I always like to start with a bit of an origin story so people can get to know you a little bit better before we dive into some topics. How did you get here?
In Australia or in HR? Because those are two different stories.
I mean, maybe that's part of the journey because I do know a little bit about your story. But yeah, in HR, how did you get here?
It's interesting you say that because when I started my career a while back now, showing my age, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So my first degree was in psychology and communication studies. And I did the whole degree and I still liked them both, right? So I really struggled to pick between them. So I said, okay, I'm going to go the clinical psychology route. So I started in my first role was actually in the social field. So I started working with alcoholics and their families at a very, very young age. And can I just say, that's where I really got up and close about behavioral change and transformation in a person, where I was constantly dealing with this debate and dilemma about, oh, people are born in a certain way, they're never going to change, right? And then when you see those transformations, when people turn a life unstructured, broken, and make a total transformation, you say, there are certain things in that journey, certain breakthroughs that people pick on and they turn their life around. So
interesting.
That journey experience I carried along with me for the rest of my career, and I never forget it, never. Then after a while, a few years in that space, I'm like, no, I'm not sure I want to do clinical psychology. Maybe I should try comms. So I spent some time in media, doing television, and so on and so forth. And I liked it too. And then I enjoyed it. And I'm like, okay, I need to pick. And then that's when I said, okay, I kind of bumped into, how about a career in HR when you kind of you need psychology, you need communications to talk to people, and in organizational comms, psychology is very important because you're dealing with people. And that's how I ventured into HR and started my career there. And again, same thing, various industries, these countries, various sectors from tourism, audit, technology, manufacturing, retail. So quite a variety of experiences, all shaped me in a different way.
Amazing. And I know you've worked in some really very diverse industries, also very non-traditional industries from a female leadership point of view as well. So I know you've been the sole person on the leadership team very often.
Yes, if I can, thanks for the feeder there, Josephine. I think if I had to talk a little bit about that, those are probably some of my hardest years in my career, but probably the years that shaped me the most, because they push you hard to really dig deep, reframe how you think, reshape the way you show up, right? To influence, because at the end of the day, I think a big part of our role as HR professionals is influencing leadership to help shape organizations. So you get into, obviously there's some bias, in terms of, okay, so you're an HR and you're a woman, so let's proceed to mansplain to you a little, right? So
Love
you
the
get
mansplaining.
the mansplaining. So you get a little bit of that, but you also, on the other hand, I guess when you change the narrative, because you have two options, and by crikey, I made lots of mistakes in terms
Mm,
of you want to defend that female being, right, in that male dominated
yeah,
environment. But what you come up against is you're still not being taken seriously,
yeah,
or possibly put in a certain pigeonhole. So okay, so that tactic doesn't work. So how do I reshape and refrain? So this is where you start. Calm down your emotion, take the emotion out of it, listen, listen more, and read the
mm,
room. And I
mm,
think that's where I started, really getting deep into reading the room. What's really happening in this room? How are the egos playing up perhaps sometimes? And who's having the upper hand in this discussion, who's not? And how would I tackle it? So that's when
yeah,
you start asking the interesting question. Okay, help me understand how that works. So I'm kind
yeah.
of telling you, I don't understand. You're still teaching me, but I'm actually using this because I'm
Getting
gonna
something out of it.
out it.
That's wonderful. And so that's been a really incredible varied career, Angelique. And I know you've still got a huge passion in this area, but you've seen some changes. So do you want to maybe start out? Let's tackle this from a bit of a timeline perspective. When you first started in HR, what was the role? What did the role entail? What were the kind of, a successful outcome? What did that mean at that time? And then how have you seen that change over time? Because I know the challenges have changed throughout, but if we think about what that role is for, how has that changed over time?
Interesting, you should say that. And my gosh, you're taking me down to a trip in memory lane,
We're going down
Josephine.
memory lane. Yeah.
So I remember when I was first and foremost, I remember very clearly when I was studying for my master's in
Mm.
HR training, HRM and training, and I remember reading about Henry Ford. You remember the pink slip or not? If you performed, you get the pink slip. If you don't, unfortunately, I can't remember what the other color,
I
but
don't remember what that is either.
you get the different color,
Is
right?
it a red one? I don't know.
Something like that. I just remember this case. I'm sure somebody in the audience remembers
That's
this.
right. That's right. They'll tell us.
So that's where largely where we started in the days of
Mm.
personnel, where it was just about sick leave and leave and maybe a little bit of payroll,
Yeah.
with the traditional files before. I remember, and I'm originally from Malta, so Malta at the time, that's what largely was. We called it HR, no more personnel at the time.
Yes.
It was still it may be a different title, but the crux of the work was that largely.
Mm.
Then obviously started evolving in, maybe recruitment. Okay. Recruitment started shaping up and started making our way its way into our function. We realized we needed processes and we can't just, recruit anyone. We need some sort of process, know what we want. So shaping that comes the performance appraisal system at the time on paper, not on systems. We didn't have the systems at the time. So again, basic processes like that. And I think we've all seen that evolution of HR really being the guardian of processes and the consciousness of the organization, which never really sat well with me,
Mm.
right? Because an organization is a system. It's a system of different pieces coming together to either provide a service, produce a product, something. So with every cog in that system has a role to play. One of those falls, I'm not saying anything extraordinary, the system falls, right? So when it comes to processes, these HR processes, the one thing that doesn't sit well with me is when we're described as the conscience of the organization, right? And the reason why I say that is because we're all human. We should all have a conscience. Why should the responsibility of culture
Yeah.
pulling people up or anything like that should sit with HR. It's every
Mm.
leader's responsibility, not
Mm.
just HR. So then, and I think we spent quite a bit of time. I think that's still evident in a lot of our roles. We still have to do that in terms of playing the conscience or reminding people or pulling people up, or are you sure that's the right way to go about it? Is this the right decision to make in this current situation? So again, as you know, in situations like that where we're asked, where even when we challenge, we play the conscience and we try and get the leaders to reframe the situation, sometimes decisions are made that we don't agree with, and yet we still have to execute knowing full well the outcome of that decision. That's the hard part sometimes.
Yeah.
We're put in. And I think this is the aha moment for me that I must have had at some time in my career. These are situations, unique situations you find yourself in as an HR professional that no MBA or master's degree or postgrad or BA teaches you, right? It's life experience. But it's also all these little nuggets. That's why I said probably the hardest years in my career were, yes, working in tough industries, but that's where it pushes you to your limits outside your comfort zone. And as you know, that's where you start learning and build
Yes.
muscle.
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
And I think too, so going back to your question around the evolution. So you've got this funny middle, us being the guardians of culture and processes for a long time, and it's still there today. But I'm seeing a shift now when it comes to that strategic HR, where it's more around the importance for us to, we went through the phases of if HR wants a seat at the table, they need to talk numbers, they need to talk the business language. So, and again, that's when you start seeing, okay, if I'm going to just talk about, let's run this performance review process or recruitment process, it's being perceived as fluff, right? It's a nice to have. If we have time for that, we'll do it. A little bit of that. Whereas if I'm saying, oh, what's the percentage of revenue per employee? I shifted the language now. Now I've got people's attention because now I'm asking the questions they're not expecting me to ask, but I'm also using those questions to generate insights as to, okay, if this is the area of growth for us, if private label is an area of growth for us, then how do I need to make sure we've got the right manpower there? We retain the top talent. Who is the top talent, right? If really managing operating costs in that function, for instance, to maximize margin, then when leaders come to tell me, okay, we need to make a salary increase for this person, right? Because of this, that, and the other. And that's where the conversation starts getting richer around, hang on, okay, if you want to increase the salary, where's the extra money coming from? How are we going to bring more business in? And all of a sudden the conversation shifts. So to answer your question in terms of evolution, I think we're going deeper into business, if you like, and less. Whilst people are important, but essentially I always say, it's a funny one. I always say I don't want to be the granny flat behind the big property, in terms of you've got the property and then you've got this little annex here. Nice, if you want to go and have a visit, you can have a visit. If not, you just leave it be, right? It's one household. It's one system. So I hope that answers your question to a degree.
No, it does. And what are the impacts of that change? So now you're saying, HR needs to be sort of seen as part of the business. What are the impacts of that?
I think I was reflecting about this the other day, because you keep hearing about people are the most valuable asset, of the organization, right? So I think by us becoming more part and parcel and a proper partner, right? And by proper partner, I mean even level playing fields. We're making decisions together. We're influencing those. We're asked for advice and input in that decision. Then, to your point, and the point I was making earlier, that people being the most important asset of the organization is not lip service anymore. It's actually real. And that's where the culture, I think, starts coming into play, and you unlock those barriers in culture, where culture takes, I wouldn't say a life of its own, because culture does have a life of its own. It's just the cultural shift, I guess that's the point I'm making.
Why is it difficult for leaders to understand that people are the most critical asset in the organization? Because I know a lot of leaders who don't really lead as if they believe that. So what do you think that's about, Angelique? Where's
Good question. I think one of the most biggest challenge I think as an HR professional I had to deal with, and I still do, is at the end of the day, a business, and I've always largely worked in private sector, right? A business is there to make money. It's either to make money, to grow, to break even, to recover from loss. It's always financial, right?
yes.
So, and as you know, pay packages, executive REM, and anything similar, it's always going to be performance related. But the problem is that performance is largely measured by, financial targets rather than people metrics, safety metrics.
Yes.
There's more focus now around, we're seeing more focus, which is important, around psychological safety and mental health
Mm,
well-being in the workplace and the impact it has on performance. Yet exec rem still is very much tied to financial targets. And then you've got in cases where you've got ASX listed companies, then you've got shareholders saying, I need bigger dividends this year. What are you going to do about it? Right.
yes.
So when you've got that big measure that it's on everyone's mind to focus on financial targets, the priority, unfortunately, rightly or wrongly, is going to be there. That's why the people piece becomes a nice to have. But that's why it pushes us to shift the narrative from talking purely about people and more how the people, through their performance, influence organization outcomes and business goals.
And I think that's the tricky bit, isn't it? Because I don't think we've got, and we definitely don't have standards around this, but it's often very difficult to measure performance or measure those people outputs and then link to business results. I think that's often a pain point for HR professionals in particular around how do you do that? How do you do that consistently? Do you have a view of maybe could you tell us a little bit from your experience where you've seen that work really well and maybe not so well?
I think many a time I try when I have a priority in my mind or like an agenda, which is okay. I need to demonstrate people's performance in some shape or form, and you always know that the situation doesn't show up when you want it, but it does show up. So you just need to be on the lookout for it. So excuse me, situations where I'm going to say, okay, if that happens, I'm going to bring this up. And this is how I'm going to demonstrate it on the table. Because sometimes this is human nature, right? People have to be in the situation to drive that awareness that you've been trying. It's not talking, it's showing. You don't show. That's
Mm-mm.
why you don't tell them, you show them. So let's say a scenario, restructuring scenario or
Mm-hmm.
reorganization scenario, you've got one scenario, one scenario. There's a scenario where that changed, it's planned well, everyone's aligned, and I wouldn't say it goes smoothly or perfectly, but it goes
Mm-hmm.
rather smoothly with minimal disruption. Not just, I'm not talking the big ticket items in terms of turnover or low morale. I'm talking productivity.
Mm-mm.
Then you take the other scenario, which is a change that's not planned well. My other annoying part is when we talk about change. Okay, let's sit down and talk about what is the change now and what's the future state. And it's not about targets. What is life after
Mm-mm.
that change? Can we talk about what that looks like day to
Yes.
day?
Yeah.
Because unless we know what that looks like,
Mm.
we're not going to get there, right? And we're going to struggle. The point I'm making there too is that a change like that, you're going to see the dip. You see the dip in productivity. I mean, again, if I take retail, for instance, or manufacturing industries I've worked in, you see the sales dip. And there was no sudden change in market. So how did that happen?
Yes.
Right? Right. So it's I think for us, it's that experience, I guess, and that intuition to say, okay, I know I can see this happening, right? I'm gonna see this happening. I can't tell them because they're not gonna believe me. So let's see in real time. And that's where I see the opportunity. Had we done it this way, or if we do it this way, I think we can maximize better results. So
Yes.
sometimes it's the longer, shorter way.
The longer, shorter way.
The way. You know what I mean? Like,
That's right. So you've got that longer term view in a way. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
but what I mean,
But you're using the opportunity that's presented to you today. Is that what you mean by longer,
let
shorter?
me explain. Okay, let me
Yeah.
explain that. I can say it to you in a sentence, but you're not going to believe me. So the only way you're going to buy into what I'm telling you is by me showing you, and that may take a little longer.
Right. Okay.
So it's the longer, shorter way in that we could easily do it the short way, but it's not going to work, or we go the longer
Yes.
way and it's more effective.
Yeah, exactly. And in some ways, so, I can see an opportunity there where if you are implementing for whatever reason poorly a process, tracking that and then having that data for the next time it happens is your arsenal. That's where your experience can come to bear, and then you're talking in the language that the rest of the leadership understand, because you're saying, look, last time we did this, we did it poorly, we had a 10% drop in productivity or whatever that is. Let's not have a 10% drop of productivity again. We know it'll drop a little bit, but let's expect better of ourselves. And that conversation is different to saying it's the right thing to do to look after your people during a disruption. Isn't it? Right. Yeah.
Spot on.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
shorter way. The other, right? It's the shorter way.
Because
It's
that
easier.
doesn't always resonate,
It
that
doesn't land.
emotional argument, or the moral argument in a way,
Yeah.
the values-based argument, right?
Correct,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then, again, restructure's gone wrong. All of a sudden, we've got process breaks everywhere. All processes that used to work. Oh, yes, that's why. Because, when you've done that change, we actually didn't review all these processes. We
Yes.
took out, some key knobs out of that process, if you like, and this is the result. So
Yes.
next time, we can't just, it's not to do the restructure, as you would know, Josephine, it's the easy part.
That's right.
It's the easy part. The
It's
hardest
it's
part,
not where you end.
right? The
Yeah.
hardest part is what's life looks like after, and what are the repercussions or benefits of that change.
Exactly. Exactly. Otherwise, you're doing redos, and we see this in organizations a lot, where they just keep doing redos, and whereas what you really want to do is embed the structure that you've put in place in a human-centered way, so that people now understand how to work differently and now understand how to relate to those new processes as well that you're talking about.
That's right. But also preempts. Like, I think as leaders, we've been through these cycles, business cycles, peaks and troughs, so many times in our career. You learn to preempt the consequence of that change. So how do we plan and prepare for it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and again, going back to, why leaders know this. I think largely leaders do know this, but again, it goes back to that pressure to put the structure in place in time and on budget within a certain time frame so we can demonstrate it, but at what cost?
Yes, yeah. And so, Angelique, so now we've got a lot of organizations and leaders facing into enormous ambiguity and uncertainty because of geopolitical trends, but obviously technological trends that particularly we're all talking about. AI, automation and robotics has been around for longer than this, though,
Yes,
however. We have seen, particularly when you think about the enormous change in manufacturing and even in retail, some of the automation and robotics used in the customer service value chain there. But what do you see are the major challenges going into the future, and how prepared is the HR industry for those changes?
think first and foremost, whilst, and I was having this discussion with my husband the other day actually about the long-term view versus the short-term view. I think because you've got the technological advancements and all these sudden geopolitical changes, you can't
Mm,
really plan long term. You have to be agile and think in short stints,
yeah,
which I think to that degree, I think it suits the current leadership thinking style. I mean, if you look at the last decade, leaders tend to think 2-3 year
yeah,
mark,
that's right.
right?
Yes.
which is, I think that suits. I think
Mm,
where the thinking needs to change, both for business leaders and therefore the HR, is I see sometimes a lot of knee-jerk reactions, right? Panic. We spoke about restructures. Okay, we need to cut costs. This is the number we need to hit. How are we going to go about it? And HR just follows suits and
mm,
executes, and then we're dealing with the consequences later.
yeah.
So you've got that knee-jerk reaction instead of, okay, how do we create space and think about this a little bit differently? Is there a better way
Mm.
of doing this so that we, I guess, maximize, still reach the outcome, but from a different angle? I remember case studies coming to mind, and I don't remember all the detail, but IKEA, for instance, they were thinking, or I think they did, taking out a lot of their customer service agents to replace them with AI. They actually, at the end of the day, they changed their point of view and decided to redeploy and retrain those agents.
Right.
Say to most of us HR professionals, it's stop and think a little, and we're used to it, right? Because often, like I said, we're probably pulling leaders up and say, "Have you thought about this differently?" Maybe for us HR professionals, it's okay. You've got that muscle built.
Mm.
Be more vocal. Take a little bit more risk in providing that people that different perspectives that probably sometimes you're afraid it will fall on deaf ears. You never know.
So it's really, rather than just having the seat at the table, use it, use that voice, use that, and go a bit boldly, because there is probably some things that other leaders need to hear, and the organization particularly needs to adapt to.
Yeah, correct.
Fantastic. What are the new capabilities around that? So when I think about people in this profession, some will do that, some will have that capability, but not all will. So what do you think are the capabilities that people need to lean in or think about developing if they haven't got them already?
I think we need to reframe some more of our thinking around stability. I think is a thing of the past. We know that, right?
Yeah.
I think adaptability is fast replacing stability. It's again, how do you're continuously aware of your surroundings and what's
Mm,
happening around you, and how do you adapt to that? I think that's another muscle that's quite important. Sure, people sometimes they fall into the trap of, you know, call it head in the sand or inward focus.
yeah, exactly. So that more strategic view and really looking out, and I think that requires more collaboration with others outside of the organization, or perhaps needing to get more of a larger network of people within your orbit, so you see those things coming. Is there anything else, Angelique?
Again, we have to mention AI. I thought I was
Yeah,
not going to mention AI, but
that we
it's
have to.
there, right? I mean, we know that the jobs that we've got today, some of those will not exist in 10 years time. Some of those jobs we don't even know what they look like.
Mm,
So again, what's the impact on us as HR professionals trying shaping the organizations of the future? So
yeah.
again, we're talking about ambiguity, dealing a lot with
Mm,
the unknown.
yeah.
Um, so I think for us, we really need to stay sharp and build that muscle around what does workforce planning actually for the future look
Mm,
like? How is recruitment going to change as a result? We're hearing a lot of
yeah.
noise around recruitment, the recruitment system being broken. We've got a lot coming at us at the moment. So I think we really need to keep aggressive, keep our ears on the ground as to all this progress and then asking the question is that how does it impact our organization? I've seen even organizations I've been in and I've been part of when it comes to whilst we're introducing AI
Mm,
to the
mm,
organization in the longer term. If you put the advice was, and I really would like to explore it further and certainly share it here, in that if your strategic imperative, for instance, is to impact customer experience in some shape or form, not the customer service agent, but in some shape or form, increasing efficiency in that back process to get to the customer sooner,
mhm.
then that's where you need to focus your resources.
Right. Yes. Yes. So it's really not looking at what you think you know, because I think when we look at that low hanging fruit, particularly with AI applications, it's because we think we know how to manage that, and it's safe. It's actually asking the question from more of a strategic perspective. What if we actually had an automated process here that was, more accurate and a better experience for our customers? Then applying, and that will require, I'm sure, partnering with people who know how to make that a reality. But I love that. I love that, Angelique. That's like a light bulb for me, because I think we do tinker around the edges of what we think we know we can do with AI. We absolutely do that.
Correct.
Absolutely.
And when you think about it, even in previous, look up, some of the biggest revolutionary, I guess, products in the market, Uber, Airbnb, I'm not mentioning anything new. They all started with the customer at the center and then worked
Yes.
their way back. So why
Yes.
should
Yeah.
AI be different?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Let's improve our customer experience and look at how to do that better. Absolutely. And I know that many organizations really have this incredible need to link up those different vertical silos that add to that customer experience, and maybe that's where we could be using some of these amazing tools to help people link up those various areas in the organization, through a collaborative technology. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Is playing with AI here, and then you've got
Yes.
um, product playing with AI here. But hang on, how do we merge these, or how do we make them
Mm.
interrelate and interdependent for the purpose of the customer?
Yeah, how do we connect the dots? And then I guess the other side of that, which you touched on, but I just want to go back to that, is of course the governance and the policy around AI, which goes to, which I'm sure in the future will be, at what point do we consider an AI agent, an EFT? Like as in a not a real person, but equivalent to a real person in a role. And what is that implication for the way we manage and plan for workforce resources, demand, supply, all of that?
For me, the bigger question there too, it's not only when, but how do
Mm,
you manage this type of workforce? Do the policies still the traditional policies still apply in a situation like
yeah.
this? I'm not sure I have the answers for you,
Mm,
Josephine. There, I think I have more questions than answers. And then again, for us HR professionals, like leaders alike, we're heading into bigger unknowns, right? And I think the challenge too for us, like I said before, it's going at pace.
mm,
In
mm.
the past, right? We spoke, when we started this conversation, we spoke about personnel. In the past, we didn't
Yes.
have computers, we didn't have mobiles, we didn't have the technology. So things took longer to happen and to evolve. Now it's obsolete or the week after or 2 weeks later.
That's right. So we are going at pace. Absolutely.
So going that pace. So to answer your question, I think first and foremost, going back to an earlier comment I made, AI is going to be everyone's responsibility.
That's right. It'll be an interesting question. And whatever happens, we know that we talk about workforce that's an abstract term. When we think about people in roles in organizations, we know that people will change because of their relationships with new technologies. And so the way in which they work, the way in which they think about work, and the way in which we think about optimizing that relationship will change. We just don't know how yet. And it's almost, I keep thinking about the way in which you get incredible innovation when you allow for diversity. And maybe we could think about, a tool like AI or a new technology that, the new sort of opportunities that AI brings in this way. When I was at Telstra, I was driving diversity and inclusion in my part of the organization, which was Telstra Operations. We had a program for giving access to roles for people with a disability who may not who were absolutely qualified for the role, but they may not have even been shortlisted for that role. So we had like an internship program. It was like I think it was 12 weeks. And so, and I remember one of my network engineering team leaders talking about his experience after he had onboarded a team member as part of this program who was hearing impaired. So this person was actually maybe even totally deaf. And what happened in those 12 weeks is that whole team improved their communication with each other because they had a deaf person in their team. So suddenly their communication had to be clearer. They had to communicate in different ways, which didn't just rely on, kind of talking and
Good.
listening. And so, and that innovation would never have been an impact that I would have thought about from a program like that. And maybe that's how we can think about this as well.
Yeah, I'm interested. Yeah, because that's an aha moment for me, right? Because, like I said, um, and I've seen instances like you said, when you've got a mixed ability within the team. If the team is keen, is interested in succeeding, it's interesting how the dynamic changes and people start seeing the world in a different light in terms of, oh my gosh, took this for granted, right? Because you don't know how far you have to go, when do you need to stop, so you're aware of everything. It feels a little bit like that at the moment.
Absolutely. So maybe we're just in the L plates, Angelique.
Probably something like
Get
that.
better. With practice, we'll get better.
I think the problem here, though, is that the drivers are still learning themselves.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. As we're all in the same place. So, but I think that's something, that we can talk about maybe another time, is how learning orientation is going to be absolutely critical. And, and again, HR professionals have a role in ensuring that there are conditions in place in the organization where there is capacity to learn, where that learning is then recycled into increased capability. So learning becomes very important in this. Yeah, maybe we can have a chat another day, Angelique. Well, thank you so much. It's been a really interesting conversation. I knew it would be interesting, and I love where we went with that. So, Angelique, maybe you can come back another time and we can keep chatting about things of mutual interest and passion. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Angelique.